Hello and welcome to Skill Acquisition Revision Screencast. Today's focus is going to be on the types and uses of guidance to aid the learning and movement skills. Now we'll have a look at the kind of descriptions of these in a second. There are 4 ways a coach can aid the learning of a performer's movement skills. We need to be able to do the following. You need to be able to translate each of these 4 types of guidance into a descriptor. So you need to know that a verbal, for example, translates to instructions or coaching points. Visual translates into demonstrations. Manual translates into the physical manipulation of a movement. And finally, mechanical is use of equipment or apparatus to aid the learning of skills. Once you can do that, you have to be able to give an example, okay, of each of those on how a coach could use these to aid the learning of movement skills, and then we have to be able to give advantages and disadvantages of each of these types of guidance. So that's your basics. That's how you could be asked questions directly from the specification. However, as with anything in a skill acquisition, you have to make sure that you can link these to other areas of specification, because exam questions might combine. Now, if you looked at the stages of learning screencast, you'll have seen that stages of learning and guidance are extremely linkable. So you must make sure you're ready to do that. So if we start off, then the first way, like I said there, that you could link it to stages of learning. Let's have a look. You must make sure that you know, for example, how these 2 types of guidance, for example, could be used in the cognitive stage of learning. So if you have a look down here, this will show you an example of a question that could link the 2 of these here, the guidance linked to stages of learning. So you've got describe what visual guidance is, and then it says here, why might visual guidance be used in the cognitive stage of learning? So that shows you how that is really important to be able to link these 4 stages of learning. Okay, so that's that done. That's your intro. Let's have a look then. Let's start having a look at how we explain the types of guidance, example them, and then look to give some advantages and disadvantages. So starting off then, visual guidance. Visual guidance is the use of demonstrations to aid the learning and movement skills. For example, a coach demonstrating a pass in netball, football, hockey, rugby, whatever. Okay, you can use any example there. Now, to make visual guidance, it's most effective. There are certain things we have to make sure. So it's most effective if the demonstration is clear, so the whole group can see what the coach is demonstrating. Secondly, the demonstration of visual guidance is most effective if the demonstration is correct. Okay, it has to be correct. We'll have a look at that and analyse that a little bit when we look at disadvantages. It must be repeated a couple of times just to make sure you can get that reference point in the brain. And then finally, it's most effective if it's kind of combined with verbal guidance. So you're giving kind of a demo, but you're also giving some coaching points alongside it. And then if it's performed by a significant other or role model, it might be more likely to be imitated, or will be more likely to be imitated. You can probably link that to the observational learning theory proposed by Bandura. Okay, so from there, advantages then. So the advantages for cognitive performance. What makes visual guidance advantageous to cognitive performance, beginners? Okay, so you often hear the phrase, a picture paints 1,000 words. Now, what we're looking at here, we're looking at that concept of a picture, because a cognitive performer, it allows them to create a mental picture, or a mental picture. Put this, you don't have to write this, but it's a mental reference point really of what they're trying to do. And the reason why they need that is because they don't have any idea what the skill looks like. So they've got to create this mental picture from the demonstration in their brain, and that allows some kind of positive transfer in their brain. So if we go from there, what are the disadvantages then? So think about the disadvantages. It goes back up to here. Okay, absolutely vital that this demonstration is correct. So, the disadvantages are that if the demonstration is incorrect, it can lead to lifelong poor technique. Even at the top level, you see elite performers who have technical flaws that, probably due to the fact that they got a bad habit early in their lives, which could insinuate that maybe the demonstration was poor that they received when they were at the start of their kind of sporting lives. So if we go from there, that's your kind of first section on visual guidance. Let's have a look at the second type, so verbal guidance then. So verbal guidance is the use of instructions. Okay, so instructions is a key word there to aid the learning of skills. For example, it could be a coach saying to a football player, use the side of the foot when passing. They might show a pass, visual guidance, demonstrate it, then they might say, right, now focus on kicking with the side of your foot because it's got a bigger surface area. That's an example of verbal guidance. Now, verbal guidance is most effective All right, and I'm sure you can start to think of some of these reasons. So if the instructions are clear and concise, you're looking at 1 to 2 coaching points at a time, certainly for a cognitive stage of learning performer. Then you must make sure the instructions can be heard. So for example, making sure the whole group is quiet so that people can hear exactly what you're saying. Then instructions most effective if they build. So this verbal guidance, if they build on the visual guidance that you've demonstrated. Okay, so it's kind of you show them something and then explain what you've done and what they should be doing. For example, the side foot example I gave you earlier. And it's a really, really effective, you could say most effective for autonomous performance, because autonomous performance, it allows in-depth tactical coaching points or feedback on what they're performing. And of course, verbal guidance in this case, when we're talking about autonomous performance, it could link to actually negative feedback. You remember that criticism where autonomous performers are very keen to find out their weaknesses and improve on them. Okay, so this could be linked to that a little bit. So going on from there then, let's have a look at disadvantages then. So the disadvantages of giving instructions are if you give too many instructions, because it leads to something called information overload, where there's too much information coming in for performers or learners to process, particularly relevant to kind of cognitive performance there. There's a key criticism for them. Okay, so that's your kind of visual, verbal, demonstration, instructions, some key things here on what makes them most effective and advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so have a look at that. Make sure you've got your notes set up on that, and we'll have a look at our second types of guidance. So our second group of guidance starts off with manual guidance. So manual guidance, if you use the man from manual guidance, basically refers to the physical manipulation by a coach through a learning of a movement skill. So for example, a coach supporting a performer through the cartwheel motion in gymnastics, or you could have a golf coach basically on the side, maybe holding the arms and helping them push through a putting technique. So that's that. That's the manual guidance, but it's got a kind of a partner in crime, I suppose, when you're talking about guidance. You've got mechanical guidance. Now, mechanical guidance refers to the equipment or apparatus used to aid the learning of a movement skill. So, for example, this is equipment attached to a performer that helps them through the movement. So, for example, a harness allowing a trampolinist to practice a somersault. Okay, it gives them that kind of equipment to aid the learning through the movement. For example, you could also say a rugby scrum machine. It's a scrum machine. It's holding the scrum together, allowing them to practice the movement of pushing in a scrum. So these two then are very similar. They're external types of guidance. Okay. Now, if you look at this and think, one is the physical manipulation by a coach. The other one is the use of equipment to aid the learner through a skill. Although they are different, slightly different in kind of definition or kind of in the key descriptor here, which is red and red, the key thing we have to think is that although they're different, slightly different in terms of description and execution with regard to the guidance, the advantages and disadvantages are identical. Okay, they are identical. So that's the good thing. We don't have to know a group of advantages and disadvantages. We can just use advantages and disadvantages for both of these two together. So let's have a look then. First of all, what are the advantages of kind of these types of guidance? Well, firstly, it increases safety. Okay, so increases safety. For example, let's think of I don't know. Well, I'll give you an example in a minute. So increase safety. It could also increase confidence, and it can also develop a kinesthesis of the movement. What do I mean by that? Let's use an example. Here's my nephew here. Okay, let's see with this. So basically, if you look at this, we've got the key things here. We've got stabilizers on a bike, which is an example of mechanical equipment-based guidance. Okay, so these stabilizers here increase the safety because they stop him from falling over. Second thing, they increase confidence. Okay, so look at the smile on his face. He's happy. He's riding his bike. He feels great. Not only that, it helps develop kinesthesis, the feel of the movement. So he can actually feel the technique of pedaling, which I think is a really important point. Now, that's good. Okay, so he's riding his bike, pedaling, feeling the kinesthesis, confidence, smile, and safety. Less chance of falling over. Now, that is not to say that these guidance types are kind of always effective. Let's have a think about the disadvantages. Now, I look at this in a particular example of my nephew. I remember the experience of this and taking a photo. He's in the park, enjoying himself, confident, but then he started to get a little bit overconfident. Okay, he started to get a little bit cocky, and I saw him riding on his bike, and he was going past a girl who was walking, and he just looked round and gave her that smile, just to say, look at me, I can really ride my bike with extreme skill. I looked at him, I thought, you cocky little... Anyway, so what I thought was, how am I going to make him understand the disadvantages of guidance? Okay, well, I did. So when he had his lunch, okay, he was having his lunch, eating his sandwiches, little triangles, loving life. I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly undo his stabilizers. Okay, so Anyway, when he came back, he'd ate his lunch, he's ready to go, get on his bike. He gets on this bike, starts trying to ride off, smash straight down on the floor, scrapes all his knee, and was in a bit of discomfort. Now, obviously, that's pretty cruel. However, he has to learn that mechanical and manual guidance, the disadvantages are that you can become over-reliant, and more importantly, that you can develop a false kinesthesis. All very well smiling when you've got the stabilizers, okay, on there, thinking you're developing the kinesthesis, but it's not the real kinesthesis because you're not balanced, okay? It's not real balance or equilibrium or kinesthesis. So he soon learned that if it was false kinesthesis and over-reliant, I have to say he didn't really fall over. It wasn't on the concrete, it was on the grass. He was fine. But you can't put a price on learning. You have to learn that manual and mechanical guidance have to be taken away at some point because you can become over-reliant and develop a false kinesthesis. So there are your kind of advantages, disadvantages. What I'm going to ask you to do now is just to have a little bit of a kind of check and just to see if you can kind of memorize these. So if I put over to here then, the revision slides for these, when we're talking about types of use of guidance, if I said to you now starting off, first memory, so when you've got visual guidance, you have to think about the 3 C's. And if I think about visual guidance, you use demonstrations. In order to utilize a demonstration, you've got to see it. You've got to see it, S-E-E. If we change that to C's, there are 3 C's that make visual guidance effective. C, 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 okay, and then that allows a mental P, okay, because they have no idea of what they're trying to do. So if you could use these now, can you think about what this stands for? Pause it now if you feel like you could use that just to give the effectiveness, etc. If you want to just move on now slightly, I'll give you this so you can start to have a look at that. See if you can fill it in from there and see if that helps you with regard to revising those key bits. And then finally, let's have a look at our verbal guidance. Okay, so verbal guidance then, if you think of your instructions following logical order, should be as easy as A, B, C. However, overload, E. Okay, all right. So you've got onto there. Can you think about those now? Does that make sense to you? So if I said for these, it's a little bit harder. This is the level of performer it's best for. This means that when you've used visual guidance, verbal guidance should do this. It should make it slightly better. It should encourage it even more. And finally, when you do this, you should only be making sure they're very clear and also making sure, don't use clear, like one coaching point at a time that's easy to understand. However, if you use too much of it, it can lead to this. So if you use that now, if you're struggling with that, maybe have a look at that and see if that makes sense. And see if you can fill it in off that. And that should give you all the information you need for evaluating verbal guidance. Now let's have a look at your next section then. So if I said to you on this, manual and mechanical, let's see how you go with this. So manual guidance is this, mechanical guidance is this. Can you give the advantages and the disadvantages of this? So if I went through from there, that would be your kind of key components on the revision slide there. So if I move it on from there then, let's have a look at some exam questions. You've got 2 minutes left on this. So if I get you to pause now and have a go at answering those questions, I will then move on Screencast so you can have a look at your the mark scheme, see if you can pick the things out there. So if you see the bits I will just put over here, demonstration, example there, can be any one. Then what makes it effective for the cognitive stage of learning, because they have no ID what the skill looks like, it allows to create a mental picture of the correct skill. And then these things here, you can pick out some of your kind of key things there from what we looked at for the 3 C's. Now going on from there, another example of a question is a little bit more evaluation based here. So can you have a go at doing this question? I'll let you pause now and see if you can answer it. Once you pause that, you can start to have a look at the mark scheme and start to see if you feel effective on this section now. So mechanical there, the use of equipment. All right, so it's got a twisting back here. It could be armbands in swimming. It could be stabilizers in riding a bike. Scrum machine there. If you look at that, positives, it allows, remember we talked about kinesthesis of the movement. It also allows a building of confidence. It also allows safety. So they're the things that I use particularly. And then on top of that, negative wise, if you look down to here, over-reliant, not the full or true kinesthesis, and then you've got this extra one here that I didn't really talk about, but that will be enough for you in terms of the 2 there. Okay, so keep going back for these, pause where you feel you need to, and have a practice at the exam questions, and that is your section complete on guidance. There's no actual link here to the, there's a little bit on the phase of learning that could be linked to any of those phases or stages of learning. Thank you.